Hello again. Now, rolling blackouts have been affecting funeral parlours nationwide. However, the latest heatwave is also exacerbating the decay of bodies quicker than normal. It's now being recommended that grieving families should consider burying their loved ones quicker in the coming weeks. Well, let's speak now to Elsabe Basilio, the Managing Director of the National Funeral Directors Association. Elsabe, good afternoon. Welcome to today, and thank you very much for your time. So your association is now advising grieving families to try and bury their loved ones as soon as possible within a very short period of time.
Good afternoon, Dan, and good afternoon to the viewers. I think the article that you're referring to was through another association where they've actually requested their members to do funerals within 3-4 days. Look, we do have a problem, but there's absolutely no reason for panic. In the end, it all depends on the family when they would like to do the service. But, you know, due to the fact that some smaller funeral homes are taking strain, it becomes difficult. So if they can do the funerals within 4 or 5 days, then by all means, we do recommend that. Well, the National Health Act states that adequate and effective facilities for backup source of electricity shall be provided when there's a power failure. So every funeral home in South Africa must have a generator. And obviously, it's very costly. One of our corporate members are spending up to 200,000 Rand per month just on fuel and diesel to keep the refrigeration facilities running. So for us, it is taxing, but I think for the rest of South Africa as well. I mean, all businesses are taking strain. It is a very costly thing, the load shedding that's happening. And there's other factors that also play a role. But we must also just keep in mind that with decomposing of human remains, it happens immediately from time of death. But we need to take a few factors in consideration in terms of the environment where the person passed away, health conditions that the deceased had. All these things play a role in what we are going through at the moment.
What I'm hearing is, I'm not trying to pit you against any other association. What I'm hearing from you, you're saying that you may not be responsible for the call for people to bury as quickly as possible within 4 days, but you think it is advisable because of the conditions that we're facing, especially if you're a small funeral home, you're dealing with load shedding and you're dealing with a heat wave.
Yes, no, definitely. Look, with the heat wave, we have to take that in consideration. And yes, it would be good if families can do that within 4 or 5 days. But unfortunately, there's a lot of factors that we must look at. Department of Home Affairs needs to register the death in time for us to do the actual funeral cremation. And in some areas, Department of Home Affairs are offline. So you need to get a death certificate, and there's a lot of factors that play a role. But I think the expense, the cost is actually the biggest problem that we have at the moment, because smaller funeral parlours, I mean, it can take up to 2,500 to 5,000 Rand per day to run the refrigeration facility.
Okay. So at the moment, you say there's no need to panic.
No, not at all.
Yeah, and what would you advise, you as association, advise the funeral homes that are under your association to do? We don't know for how long the heat wave is going to last. I'm hoping to get some clarity later this afternoon from the weather service if we manage to talk to somebody, but we're still in the middle of it. And of course, we know Eskom has said load shedding, stages 2 or 3 may become permanent over the next 2 years.
Yes, I think it's important that they look at their cooling facilities. It must be very well isolated, and also what plays a big role is the amount of times a door is opened of the refrigeration facility during the day. So if you have load shedding, try and minimize the opening of the door and things like that. So those are things that they must take in account, and make sure that it's very well isolated, the refrigeration itself. Make sure your generator is working, that you've got sufficient fuel or diesel to be a backup source of electricity. So yes, but and then also our members are assisting each other. If there really is a cause of emergency or anything like that, our members are assisting other members. The problem that we have in certain areas in December, for instance, in Queenstown, was without electricity for 3 weeks. So you can imagine how costly that was for funeral homes to keep their businesses open and refrigeration running. And then also in certain areas, some of the health inspectors are forcing funeral homes to get a backup generator for their generators, because as soon as there's load shedding, you've got perpetrators that ransack the funeral homes and they steal the generators and they steal cables. So those are all things that causes a problem.
Yeah, there's a number of them. And you know, as you were talking there, Elsabe, I was wondering, in a small rural town of South Africa, how would you cope nowadays with if you're a funeral home, a funeral undertaker? It must be very hard. As you correctly said, all other sectors of our life, national life, are affected by load shedding. But it must be very tough if you're a rural operator.
Yes, it definitely is for a rural operator, because you can imagine to reach certain areas where we have a death, it can take a while. But then also, public also need to be aware of, if you we're in the midst of a heat wave at the moment, but there are some cultures that when the person passes away, that they actually cover the deceased with 3 blankets or 4 blankets, and then it is too hot. So the public also need to take note of this, try and keep the deceased as cool as possible until the funeral parlor arrives to remove the deceased. So those are also things that we need to look at. So we as funeral directors need to address all of these things. And telephonically, we always try and assist the family to do the best with what they've got. But unfortunately, in the rural areas, it is a problem.
There's a lot of education that goes with this. Of course, you are grieving, you are mourning, you want to honor the memory of your loved one, but to be practical, you have to be aware of all sorts of things, and you provide that as the Funeral Directors Association to the loved ones or the grieving family. Thank you very much, Elsabe, for your time this afternoon here on Today. That's Elsabe Basilio, Managing Director of the National Funeral Directors Association. Every sector of our national life is currently affected ongoingly by the blackouts of Eskom, but currently by the ongoing heat wave as well. Things are not looking good for some of the activities.